the mental. To him, there are two equally valid aspects of God. So you look at God from the thought aspect of spiritual. Meaning is not limited by physical. Actually, here you have contrasting. And you talk about the extension of God. Go back to the Cartesian categories. It's one substance, God seen from two perspectives of thought and substance, but in an infinite way, you may want to say. He would want to resist the temptation to subsume one under the other in a hierarchy, and to him there are two equally valid aspects of the two equally valid form of appearance of the one underlying substance, you may want to say. Building up the case, So, if that is the case, is that thought and extension are not mere properties of God, they each constitute God's essence, and each therefore present to the intellect a full and adequate idea of what God is. Okay, so in a way, you can go back to Plotinus. We talk about the rational logos. You have in it's not quite exactly the same. In the Platonic world, you have the underlying logos reality, which is the unchanging world of ideas, with the changing world of material things. Obviously, the eternal, unchanging, has more reality than the appearance, the one and the many. In Plotinus, we go a bit further in that the material world is an emanation of the one. It's not that separated, but of course, from Plotinus onwards, you have degree of existence, hierarchy of being. Now you have Spinoza coming along and said, no, even the extension is part of God. It's not just a subsidiary section of God. So now he has, you want to say, he resisted this temptation if we come from our theistic mindset, we are very scared of identifying God with nature, because in our theistic mind, I don't know. I mean, why can't that be the case? I'm just curious. You know what I mean? I think we have it's so ingrained in us as Christians already through Western civilization. I mean, the Hindu is no issue. So here you have Spinoza boldly venturing where no one else has gone in his time. You know what I mean? Hindu heart. Actually, in the 19th century, with the discovery of Hinduism, it did make a lot of influence. I mean, Schopenhauer, so they all were reading Hindu Buddhist thoughts, you know. But before that, I mean, this is a new guy, you know. So anyway, just to say the trajectory that you're trying to make a distinction. So,
can I intercept?
Yep.
And ask? Then in that case, he doesn't make a distinction between the thought and creator and the created.
There are two aspects of the one underlying substance. There's a distinction, but they're viewed from two different aspects. To him, there's one substance only. You can look at this from one perspective of thought, and you look at it from another perspective of the world, the nature, so to say. Now that's why we see a pantheist, is does he believe in God, has been a nice debate between the scholars. I think for me, at the end of the day, for Descartes, there is no difference between God and nature, but there are two different aspects of the one underlying substance. But you have to use his language in order to keep. I mean, to be fair to him, rather than import our own theistic category, so to say. So we have to enter into his world. So, but let's go further. Let me develop a bit further first, and see after that.
How about Plotinus' view? You are saying the rational logos.
I mean, earlier Plotinus' view would be that you have the one who somehow divide, and then you have different layers of emanation, E-M-A-N-A-T-I-O-N, emanation, something that proceed outwards and produce the world that we see. But The assumption being that what was originally pure and divine, as it proceeds from the one, it goes further and further away. You have different spiritual stuff, human stuff, animal stuff. We have a hierarchy of beings, and but the assumption is the further it goes from the source of emanation, the less reality it has. That's why further away, like the Hindus, the further away it goes from the one, impurity comes in. That explains evil in the world. So.
And Platonic view will be the forms and the...
Yeah, just the form and the ideas, the form, and the world of appearance.
Okay.
In both these cases, there are difference in grades of reality, but not in Spinoza. He refuses to dichotomize that, so to say. So, okay. So God has a mind. If God is thought, not meaning God conceived various possibilities and then choosing one of them to actualize. God is perfectly rational and all of God's actions are necessary. However, God is still free in the sense that He's unconstrained by anything outside Himself. So, when you say God has a mind, we must be careful not to import our human mind. How does our human mind work? Our human mind basically operates through a process of deduction, inferences, in order to arrive at knowledge. Our mind, our attainment of knowledge is never direct. Our attainment of knowledge is always a deliberation process. Even in the Christian God, when God decreed to make the world, we separate the processes logically. But actually, if you ask me, God's knowledge of the world is immediate, not mediated is the word. Mediated means it goes through a process of experience and deduction, if you want to say. But God's knowledge of things are immediate, you might want to say. So, and even when God creates, even if God bring the existence you bring the world exists because it's part of God's process. It's not as though God has gone through the process. Okay, what kind of world should I create? And then, okay, this is the world. And then there's a deliberation process. That is to import our human processes to God. God has a mind doesn't mean only to say that whatever He does is rational and logical, and whatever is logical must have a quality of necessity. If you go to the process of argumentation, there must be one A equal B, B equal C, and there must be a logical, necessary process. So, must God, therefore, out of necessity, make the world, or rather make the world? Okay, make the world. Okay, that we perceive. There's a big question. Must God create? These kind of questions will introduce confusion, because I think the important thing is to recognize that eternally you always have God and nature. If nature is another aspect of God, but if nature is another aspect of the one substance which you call God, and if God is eternal, so nature has to be eternal. Okay, so that's sense. So, but assuming God brought forth this existence, is it when you say God does things, whatever God does necessarily, does that mean God is not free? There's a difference between necessity that is due to an external pressure and necessity that is due to one's own choice. And therefore, he said God is still free in the sense that He is unconstrained by anything outside Himself. And talk about outside God, as far as when you talk about Spinoza, there's nothing outside God, because all of nature is also inside God. God and nature. So there's nothing outside God, therefore God is not, so there's nothing outside God. Now, if you think about in theism, God, the world, even if God transcends the world, God causes the world to exist. If you follow, God is the efficient cause, following the Aristotelian category. Efficient cause, the one that brings it to exist. You have the formal cause, the material cause, the teleological purpose cause, and the efficient cause, the agent. But when you say God causes the world in the theistic sense, God is a separate agent that brings the world into existence. But that is not the case. Because if God is not distinct from the world, if God causes the world to exist as we can perceive it, if I may put it this way, so the way you put it, God is the immanent causality. So you're not talking about efficient causality. Efficient causality, the concept assumes a distinction between the agent and the object. But if the agent, there's no distinction between the agent and the object, then God is the immanent, the internal causality, not the product of being who is distinct from the world. So that's why I use the word panentheism. Okay, now let me formalize it a little bit. Let me formalize it a little bit. And here, yeah. So, Spinoza's major task is a proof that God does not exist independently of nature, but instead there exists only one substance, that is God and nature. So you look at his first 15 propositions, which are substantive, and then you pick them up. It's what the argument says. They cannot exist in the universe two or more substances having the same nature or attribute. Fair enough, I think. If you use the word substance the way it's been defined. God, defined as substance consisting of infinite attributes of which each expresses eternal and infinite essentiality, necessarily exists. Okay, here's an earlier argument. God necessarily exists. Okay. Therefore, besides God, no substance can be granted or conceived. Okay, like this formalized argument. You read Spinoza, you cannot really in bed unless you want to fall asleep. So you have to go through step by step. Okay, I think I'm just introducing the general contours of the line now. So I proceed, otherwise you'll never finish the thing. So basically, the intuition is correct. The intuition is the one that sets your premises for the argument. Intuition is that if two things share the same set of attributes, they will be the same thing. And if there's only one substance in the world, then there is no separation between the world and God, so to say. Okay? So there's only one substance, so there's no separation between God and nature. In other words, basically it's that. So let's carry on, and we can stop at a nice place, I hope. Okay.
Question?
Yeah. Your question? Yeah.
Yeah, he's just saying that he doesn't believe that creation ex nihilo.
He doesn't believe in creation as we normally would associate with by the act of God, in which he confer existence to something different from him. God, different God. That wouldn't be Spinoza's idea. If there's no, so nature in that sense will have to be eternal as much as God is eternal. And I said elsewhere in the little podcast, the conception that the world has a beginning is a very recent conception because of the influence of Christian doctrine of creation. All through history, all the major thinkers have always believed that nature is eternal. It's always been the case. So in that sense here, it is not something odd to the world around. Spinoza advocated the eternity of the world. It's just how do you connect that with God? So that's what it is. I mean, Plotinus and all this, they talk about the eternity of God, but it's a subsidiary degree of existence compared to the one, so to say. Or yeah, so basically it's that. But whereas now Spinoza said, no, let's put them together. Now, if the universe, so the universe expresses connectors. Connectors is a very crucial word, which will, shall I say, repeat when we deal with likeness. I think it's a very important thing. You see, the way we conceive the world is the world comprises dead, inanimate objects. You know, you look at space, nothing is alive. A stone is a stone. Stellar dust is stellar dust. The sun is the sun. There's no life. There's no life means there's no will towards something. I think if nature is part of God, nature cannot be dead, so to say. So nature has a certain striving, so to say, striving to be, and the word is called connectors. Striving is a will. There's different English words to try to translate this Latin word, So each object in the universe in some way wants to be what it is, to the will to exist, so to say. But whereas in Christian thought, we talk about the end of the world, the consummation of the world. History marches on to fulfill a goal and destiny, so to say. The eschatological concept of the world is a Christian concept. Before the Christians, you have the Greeks talk about the eternal world. What happened to the eternal world? We have this world, and the world as we see it has time, as we seem to experience. Then they say, if it goes on, but rather, if you don't believe, if the world is always what it is, there's no goal, then you talk about cycles of nature, cycles of time. Time is cyclical. If the world is eternal, there will be repetition of all that we're doing, because by definition of eternity, all things are possible. And so the only way to conceive that consistently would be to talk about repetition of history. But it's the Christian that break this. So therefore, in the Spinoza case, you have to imagine nature has a certain striving to be, but it's not to be in the eschatological sense. It's just to exist as God has always existed. So that's the meaning here, that there is no teleology of final goal. The universe is simply the way what each thing and individually as a whole is striving to be. Let's enter into this strange world. So now you have this God, or rather one substance God, but then you have the nature as we have, and you have within nature we have finite objects. People like us, the world around us, they're finite. If there's one substance that is infinite, and now you have finite objects, how am I going to relate them? They're not equal, and yet they're part of, the finite objects is part of God. So he comes up with this idea, finite objects are not substance. Why? Because finite objects, the world we see around us, depend on something for our existence. So they're not the one substance. The one substance means something that self-exists by itself conceptually and existentially. So finite objects are not substance, but if they're part of God, in what sense are they part of God? They are modes of God, modification, modes of God, or rather, God's particular way of manifestation. So you have the one substance that manifests itself infinitely. It can manifest itself in finite modes. The world of mathematics, so to say, has its infinite modes. You have infinity